Ladies and gentlemen, few more of you in your seats. Let's begin the post-lunch session, and this one throws light on the space of agri-economy. We're going to be talking about how agriculture will be placed when we will be a developed nation in the year 2047. May I please invite on the dais the honorable panelists of this session. Ramesh Chand, Member Agriculture, NITI Aayog. Good afternoon, sir, and a very, very warm welcome to you. Aye, please. Ramesh Chand ji, aye sir, please. Ramesh Chand, Member Agriculture, NITI Aayog. Namaste, sir, and a very warm welcome. Ashok Gulati, noted agri-economist. Mr. Ajay Vir Jakhar, Chairman, Bharat Krishak Samaj. And this is moderated by Sanjeeb Mukherjee, Agriculture Editor, Business Standard.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all the panelists and the guests on this Business Standard Manthan Day 2. And as I understand, this is the best time to have a discussion on agriculture after having a hearty meal. So on my left is Dr. Ramesh Chand. He is one of the most noted economists, agriculture economist, member NITI Aayog, followed by Dr. Gulati, another well-known name in agriculture economics and agriculture in India, and then Mr. Ajay Jakhar, chairman of Bharat Krishak Samaj, one of the farmer voices who are very prominent in this country. So welcome all, sirs. So to start with, my first question is from the panel discussion is on the topic that we are discussing today. I would like to have views of each one of you that in 2047, when we are dreaming to become a developed nation, where does agriculture, you see agriculture standing to be? And how do we, what would be the shape of Indian agriculture 20-25 years from here onward? The challenges, the things that we should be looking forward to. I'll start with Dr. Chand first, and maybe Dr. Gulati follows.
Thank you, Sanjeev. First of all, I congratulate Business Standard for choosing agriculture as one of the themes during this Business Standard Manthan. If you look at any of the goal of Viksit Bharat or where we want to take Indian economy, Indian society by 2047, you will just find that most of those goals can't be imagined without focusing on agriculture. Even after 75 years of independence, agriculture remains the largest sector of Indian economy with 18% share in Indian economy. At current price as well as at constant price, this share is higher than even manufacturing. So because of its weight, agriculture will matter to have high growth or a required growth rate for India to become Viksit Bharat by 2047. The second dimension is there are studies which show that 1% growth in agriculture is to 4 to 5 times more powerful in reducing poverty. You compare with manufacturing, overall non-agriculture, so you just find that agriculture is much more powerful in reducing poverty. Therefore, to achieve the inclusive growth, again, agriculture is very, very important. Then there are other goals like goal of sustainability. We all know that agriculture use 80 to 90% water. If we want to make sustainable use of our natural resources, be it water, be it land, be it air, agriculture is critical because it uses 80 to 90% of the total use of water in the country. Similarly, when it comes to emission, the contribution of agriculture to greenhouse gas emission is second after energy sector. Emission from agriculture are much higher than what are the emission from manufacturing sector. Therefore, if we want to halve the level of emission, or if we want to achieve net zero by 2070. So this is the second most important sector after energy sector that we must address this. Then there are other kind of issues that new kind of sources of demand are entering agriculture. Traditionally, agriculture was considered important to meet food, feed, fiber requirements. But over time, you just find that so many demand from bioenergy, agriculture for ethanol, and agriculture for many other uses. Now the question is that how agriculture will be able to meet all these goals, all these expectations. That is really a formidable challenge. As we go along, we can discuss, but I would like to conclude by sharing some statistics with you. One is that growth rate of agriculture sector is accelerating, and in last 10 years, we have close to 4% growth rate in agriculture, which is unprecedented in history of India. Not only in India, that India also aspired to become bird power in many areas. We are trying in manufacturing and others, but I think agriculture is one area where already we are the third largest agrarian economy. If you look at the data on GDP of agriculture by country, which is available in Bird Development Indicator of Bird Bank, it just shows that India's share in global GDP in last 20 years has increased from 8% to 14%. With the current growth rate, at present we are having highest growth rate in GDP agriculture. We have surpassed even China. China is 3.8, India is 4.0%. But thing is that many people still look at modern sector, computer, manufacturing, services. They don't look at agriculture, that this is the sector which is very important for us. This is the sector which can really help India to achieve its ambition in terms of growth, in terms of becoming bird power, in terms of improving health of people, and in many other areas. Okay.
Right. Dr. Gulati, the same question to you in 2047, maybe in the next 23, 24 years, where do you see Indian agriculture to be? Means from the current state, I mean, where do we stand? What is your vision? Where do you see the agriculture sector in the next 23 years?
Well, let me also compliment Business Standard for organizing this and thinking about agriculture. The first and foremost thing is people have to be fed, and they have to be fed well. Today, children below the age of 5, 35% are stunted. They will become a part of the workforce by 2047. If they are stunted, their earning capacity will be much less. It affects lifelong situation. Why they are stunted? Many reasons. One is food. Our soils have become deficient in zinc. Our wheat and rice have become deficient in zinc, and that deficiency of zinc leads to stunting. Of course, there are other factors of sanitation and immunization and women education and all that. So I want to go beyond just the food security concept to the nutritional security concept. Today, in terms of food security, we have ample food. In fact, India is one of those which are net exporters, despite our ad hoc export bans.
Yes.
If I look around the world, China 1.4 billion, India 1.4 billion, Africa continent as a whole 1.4 billion. Where are they going to be? By 2050, which is what the UN population projections are, China will be going down in terms of population. India will be stabilizing at 1.66 billion, and Africa is going to be at 2.5 billion. So the biggest challenge, of course, globally will be for
Food.
Africa. But 80% of India lives literally the standards of living of Africa. The 2% top, which are the business class, top business class, another 18% you and me. How long we can drive the growth of the economy overall? I'm sure most of the people here are aware this year's overall GDP growth is 7.6% as estimated. How many people would know how much is the agriculture GDP growth this year? 0.7%. 0.7%. If this is the volatility, I wish what Dr. Chand is saying, that 4% rate of growth, if overall GDP growth is 7.5%, and if agriculture GDP growth is 4%, that's great. We can feed ourselves because population rate of growth is coming down, it's below 1%. So availability of food would be there. But the moment the income of this so-called 80% of people, which is living like African standards, when their income goes up, they are going to demand more food and better food. And that's where the challenge will come. Okay. Land is going to be more or less limited, so you have to invest heavily in agriculture R&D. We are way below what for the developing countries, most of the organizations are saying 1% of agriculture GDP should be spent on agriculture R&D. We are at half of that. Okay. So we need to ramp up. We are giving 2 lakh crores of food subsidy, free food. But what is ICR's budget? 9,500 crores. So without putting in research and development, our productivity levels luckily are still not touching the production frontier. So there is scope to improve productivity. We have to invest in agri R&D. We have to graduate to more productive and producing more from less. Protected cultivation can double, triple, 4 times your yield. Drip irrigation. I think if subsidies have to be given, they have to be given more for saving your natural resources and getting more from every drop of water. Agriculture cannot be consuming 80 to 90% of the water when the urbanization takes place and manufacturing takes place. They will demand more and more, otherwise you will have the great IT capital of India, Bengaluru, for drops of water. And then we have, even in Maharashtra, where 20% roughly is the irrigation ratio, cotton only 3% irrigated, vis-a-vis sugarcane, which is 100% irrigated. Right. So all the water, 66% of the water of the state in agriculture goes to just one crop. So these types of inequities will have to be rationalized. All this business of free power, undermining groundwater. Punjab is a classic case of ecological disaster right staring on our face. I think many of these have to be rationalized. Second thing that is going to happen, and I'll stop after one sentence, when the income of this so-called 20% of India increases, and that is increasing, and the income of 80% doesn't increase at that rate, then there is going to be a tension, and many of the manifestations of that in terms of agitations and all that will come. So we have to think not just increasing productivity in a manner that is planet positive, that is soil, water, air, biodiversity is kept in place, but also think of nutrition and overall income of the farmers need to increase. What are the best ways of that? Maybe in the second round we can talk about it.
Right.
Thank you.
So the comment with which you ended, the overall income of the farmer needs to increase. I want to bring Ajay here. Ajay, you interact with farmers and you are one of known to be the voice of the farmers. where, from the perspective of a farmer, where do you see Indian agriculture in 2047? And we know the community is pretty enraged in several parts of the country. Where do we see this going from in next 20-23 years? On.
Uh, Thank you for Business Standard. Thank you for having me here. I think the population of the country has stabilized. We should expect the same, more or less the same population by 2047. Yesterday, I heard the finance minister give a few figures which were startling, and I'm sure Business Standard can agree or disagree with it later, that by 2030, she said we will be a 70 crore economy. 70 crore people will be in the middle class. And by 2031, she said that consumer spending on agriculture will be $1.4 trillion. And by 2047, 100 crore people will be middle class. If that were to happen, with consumption patterns changing as economies expand, I don't think so we'll be able to meet the demand. In spite of, other than that, in spite of our best efforts, climate change disruptions, water depleting in bread baskets of the country, and over 2/3 of the population living in urban settings, I think we are not prepared for it. I think agriculture policy is one big bottleneck which will grind Viksit Bharat to a stop slowly and slowly before we reach 2047. And one of the issues regarding where I think the problem is agriculture research and development, which Ashok Gulati ji has already elaborated upon. And see, when you look at 2047, we have to see what has been happening in the last 10, 15 years, 20 years, and how we are changing policy to be more efficient or will meet the objectives of 2047. Agriculture research spending has more or less stayed stagnant below inflation levels for the last 20 years. Nothing has changed. Yesterday, I think so, the finance minister also said that 3 lakh crores have been allocated to the states to spend on capex, on infrastructure. I think infrastructure is not what this country needs a priority on. I'm not saying infrastructure is not required, but the priority is on building human capacity and human capabilities. And that gets impacted because agriculture is a state subject. And in the states are not investing in agriculture. Agriculture universities, agriculture research institutions, where research and development comes, there's a 50 to 60% vacancies in professors, PhD students, in everything. I was in Jabalpur last month, they had a 70% vacancy in the agriculture university. You look at animal husbandry sector, there's a 50-60% vacancy in all these sectors. So these are vacancies that cannot be filled overnight. It will take 10 years to fill these vacancies. So are we planning for it? I don't think so. We are planning for it. Agriculture being a state subject is a major problem because the states are more interested in giving old pension scheme, they're more interested in giving free electricity, they're giving and giving populist measures. And the third problem comes with how agriculture policy is framed in the country of how things work with it. If you look at China, if you look at the US, and I think so both the economists here will agree that they constantly revise their agriculture policy and support systems to farmers. China's done it a few times. I think so US does it every 5 years or something. They come out with a different policy. In India, we've had the constant same subsidies, same policies going on for decade upon decade. So that also becomes a problem. No political parties have farmer leaders whom farmers accept as farmers or representative of the farming community. Even if you look at the last 10 years or you look before that, we've had no agriculture minister whom farmers accept as a representative of the farmers. And that's why it widens the trust deficit. And that's why farmers are in disagreement with not only the central government, with the state governments, because you're not taking them on board when consultations happen. In fact, farmers are not consulted. When the farm laws were made, they were not consulted. Subsequent that, an MSP committee was made. In that MSP committee, they put in 2 farmers who I know are stooges of the pesticide industry as representative of the farming community. So if you're not going to be consulting farmers, you're not going to be having them on the policy table, policies are not going to be made. which will actually deliver to India's growth story or what we perceive it to be. And three things I would, before I end, I just want to put on three things. That reforms take time to work, you know, they have a 10-year lag period before they kick in. So governments, various governments, all governments, not this government, I mean, even the state governments are very scared of doing these reforms because the dividend's not going to be visible immediately. And all reforms are not hardwired to produce growth. Many reforms like financial and market deregulation actually increase growth, but increase inequality at the same time. And that's why you need to get stakeholders like farmers or whoever you're trying to help to assess those programs for the government. And this electoral backlash that happens comes from very small minority of people. But the people who are going to gain from it are not going to be, you know, supporting that as publicly as those who are going to lose out. So there is a political economy. Till we don't address that political economy in the farm policy, we are not going to be able to meet our 2047 goals.
That's a very, very, very interesting point to the point that you made. One thing which I was also looking, what I understand from the points that all three of you have made, one, growth is obviously needs to be accelerated in agriculture. Second, as Dr. Gulati put in, that we need to put in more money into R&D. And as Ajay said, that the policy in agriculture has to be from the farmer's perspective. They have to be part of that policy making. One problem which we all face, which we have been grappling with, which we are grappling with, is that we are producing something more, which is not required that much, but we are producing that something with less, which is very badly needed for that country. Basically, coming to the question of diversification, why I want to understand from each three of you is why diversification is such a big problem in this country. Where are the policy lacking in that? Are we not, we have put in umpteen amounts of money in diversification. We have East India, Green Revolution, Falana, Dakna, whatever we had. But we haven't moved out farmers from growing wheat and rice in major states. And even in states where they weren't growing rice and wheat, they're now growing, all of them are growing rice and wheat. So starting with Dr. Chand and then with Dr. Gulati and others, I want to understand where has the diversification policy failed for this country?
Well, Sanjeev, I don't believe that diversification policy has failed. I would say that the success of diversification varies across the states. But let me first share one clarification about what do we mean by diversification. This correct perception is very important to understand diversification. There is two types of diversification we are talking and farmer leaders are talking. One is that diversification away from rice and wheat to bring in more of pulses, to bring in more of oil seeds, to which we call field crop or MSP crop. That is one level of diversification. And there are one kind of reason to diversify in favor of pulses, in favor of oil seed, because we are deficit in those crops, we are importing, and they are environment friendly compared to rice and wheat. So that is one level. But the serious issue there is that income from those crops, even if you ensure MSP, even if you give some bonus on MSP, their profitability does not come closer to rice and wheat, especially in Northwest India. That is one type of diversification. And profitability is the reason that the gap is so big that pulses and oil seed replacing rice and wheat, that is not happening. There is second type of diversification that is toward high value alternative, high value crops on which Ashok has written, I have written, calculations are available that if you diversify cropping pattern toward horticulture crops, the income from horticulture crop on an average is generally average 4 times compared to field crops. So any state which is diversifying toward high value crops, fruit and vegetable, you find that that state is having very good growth. I can share you example from real world. At present, per hectare crop productivity of Andhra Pradesh is almost same as per hectare productivity of crop sector in Punjab. sometime Punjab little higher, sometime Andhra little higher. But at same level of productivity, growth rate of crop sector in Punjab is less than 0.5, whether you take last 5 years or last 10 years. And growth rate of crop sector in Andhra is 5%, rather more than that. Simple reason that Andhra is having lower productivity of rice compared to Punjab, but because they are diversifying toward high value fruit and vegetable, so you find their overall productivity is rising at a rate which is 10 times the rate of growth rate in Punjab. So this diversification already happening in a couple of states, and wherever this diversification is happening, you find that income of farmer is growing at a very high rate. You don't find distress kind of things. You don't see even farmer agitation there. So this is, I would say, the diversification. And the second type of diversification is away from crop sector, that you go for dairy sector. For that you require more fodder. You go for more of fishery. And right now, if you look at growth rate of these sectors, among all segment of agriculture, highest growth rate is in fishery. If you take last 10 years, the growth rate is more than 8%, all India. Then comes your dairy sector, your fruit and vegetable. So I would not agree with you that diversification is not happening in this country. Certainly diversification is not happening in particular region in this country. Reason being that through policies we are putting brakes on diversification. We are not letting market forces to operate there. And because of yield plateau, the income are not rising. You see, once yield has reached a plateau, whatever MSP you give, yield response will not come. Only to the extent of increase of price, income will increase. So today, Indian agriculture has reached a very interesting phase. I think other panelists also have to speak, where you are giving opportunity to market operate, that segment is growing very fast. Where you are interfering through MSP, too much of interference, that sector is having lowest growth. Lowest growth today, last 7-8 years. When we talk of growth, that too in a sector like agriculture, we can't take 1 year's growth. We should take at least 5 years or 10 years. The growth rate of rice and wheat, where there is maximum support in terms of output, or in terms of input, is around 1.5%. But you look at growth rate, I said about fishery, about dairy, about horticulture, it is 3 to several times compared to what is the growth rate in rice and wheat. So I think diversification is happening wherever government, state government are putting appropriate environment for diversification.
Dr. Gulati?
Well, that's true. MSP crops are only a limited segment. That's not entire agriculture. In fact, more than 80%, roughly 80%, 78% of agriculture is outside MSP regime. Poultry is the fastest growing sector, followed by fishery, followed by milk, dairy, followed by fruits and vegetables. And cereals, which are stuck in MSP business, it's 2% growth, less than 2% growth. Poultry is at 8%. So when they are growing at much faster pace, you are changing the complexion of the agriculture pie.
Yeah.
So diversification is taking place. That's very. The second thing, why in certain pocket of Northwest, we are stuck with wheat and rice, there is a legacy. And when you give free power and extremely subsidized urea, for example, we worked it out in Punjab, 1 hectare. 30,000 is the subsidy from power and fertilizers per hectare. If they are growing pulses, they are not using that much of fertilizer, they don't need that much of water, they don't create that greenhouse gas emissions, they are nitrogen fixing. So why don't you give them 30,000 rupees as to create a crop neutral incentive structure? When you have your incentive structure within the crops tilted towards wheat and rice, farmers want to minimize their risk, and therefore, because of the open-ended procurement, because of the highly subsidized fertilizers and free power, and that's a cocktail. The net result is water table is receding very fast in this greenhouse gas emissions. We worked out 5 tons of carbon equivalents on a hectare of paddy is being generated. So why don't you, if they switch from paddy to pulses, why don't you price that greenhouse gas emission per ton and reward them that, plus what the incentive was going to paddy. So we don't have a crop neutral incentive structure within the field crops. But if you move towards high value agriculture and protected cultivation, I was meeting a young lady from UP who is doing per acre, not per hectare. Through protected cultivation, she is growing capsicum and kheera. She is making 15 lakhs per acre. That is 5 times more than a Punjabi farmer makes from wheat and rice. 15 lakhs per acre, not per hectare. That's very much there. So if you do this type of and through drip,
Okay.
and using fertigation, so no environmental damage.
Yes.
So that is the type of agriculture I would like to see in 2047.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ajay, coming to you, you're also the former chairman of the Punjab Farmers Commission, and this problem of diversification, as we understand, is most acute in Punjab and Haryana. So where do you think it hasn't happened? Why doesn't farmers move away from Punjab?
So first I'd want to say that I agreed with Ramesh Chand's assessment of diversification to a large extent. Where I differ from Ashok Gulati ji is that Punjab farmer will not diversify at 30,000 rupees an hectare. No farmer would do it. It's too small an incentive to shift from paddy. Paddy is a very profitable crop. Farmers don't grow out of choice. I would want to tell all farmers here that no farmer grows because he wants to grow something. He grows because of 2 things. One is market signals, market demand, and the other is government incentives. So to say that farmers have diversified because the government is not interfering is wrong. The economy is expanding, demand for protein, high value produce is coming up, and farmers are responding to that. And like Ramesh Chand ji said, that because of subsidies, and like Ashok Gulati ji also said, like subsidies are there which incentivize farmers to grow paddy and grow wheat. They will grow whatever is more profitable. Even if you give them parity with cereals for other produce, they will not shift because the risk of growing other crops is far higher. The risk of market prices, the risk of weather vagaries. You know, something like chana, moong, or whatever you're calling about pulses. Agar ek din pehle bhi barish ho jayegi before harvest, you lose your 90% of your crop. It never happens more than 10% loss to wheat or paddy. It never happens. So it is much more complex than that. And I think when the economy expands, when people aspire and have more food, better nutritious food, more fruits and vegetables, farmers will diversify. Government has tried these food parks, and somebody can, because there are lots of business people here, I think 90% of them are not working if you do a proper assessment. Government has tried these food processing industry schemes. They will not work till the demand is there. Everything is demand driven. It's not production. You cannot give linkage to production. And Ashok Gulati ji on this example of protected cultivation, you know, I mean, you understand the subject, but people who don't understand the subject, then it becomes romantic for them. We can make 15 lakhs from an acre. I mean, I would be surprised if there 5 people can do it consistently over 5 years. At Punjab State Farmers Commission, we geotagged every working greenhouse we could find. And 95% of them were not working after 3 years because they could not make money, because the research and hand-holding of farm extension services is not there for greenhouses. So the other big problem of agriculture is that we find examples of success, like we find for farmer-producer organizations, FPOs, and we say that 4 FPO कामयाब हो गए, तो इसका मतलब इंडिया में FPO program 10,000 कामयाब हो जाएंगे. It's an absolute dud failure of a program. And so let's be very careful of what we find as success and then we lay it over the whole agriculture landscape. And a lot of the problems that agriculture is facing today is because international consultancy firms, and there are a few representatives of them I saw on the panel in this conference yesterday and today. They are advised, the government is taking advice from outside consultants, and they have no inkling of what's happening on the ground. An FPO program is exactly that. Punjab government has hired an international consultant to tell them, Ashok Gulati ji, on how to diversify. I'm sure you would have read about it. And so we have to build our own human capacities within the administration, within the IS officers, within the economists, within the junior officers and departments to build our own capacity. If we keep outsourcing everything, we are not going to be able to come to 2047. There are inherent problems.
Right. The next thing which I wanted to discuss is the complex issue of, but we have time for next 15 minutes, and agriculture, I know it can't be over in 45 minutes. It needs some more time.
I have a lot more to say.
Yeah. So we all, most of us come from Delhi, and we have been experiencing this for the last many years, that our traffics get hurt every time there is a farmer protest, and this has become a pretty recurring thing in this part of the world. And the problem, many people know, most of the people don't know, but the problem is MSP, and the underlying demand for every farmer protest in the last 5-7 years has been to legalize MSP, and before that even this demand for legalization of MSP has been there for many decades. I want to know from each one of you, I know there are complex political issues in legalizing MSP, but economically, what is the problem in doing that? Means why doesn't, well, I mean, there is a huge bunch of school of thought which gives out numbers which say that this is the number which you will require for legalizing MSP. This is the number which you will need for doing a price deficiency payment, and you can't do it. Why don't you do it? What is the problem in legalizing MSP? Means what is the issue there? And for this, I think I'll start with Dr. Gulati, because I think his views are far more strident in that.
You have to first understand when MSP came into existence. What was the scenario at that time? We were hugely deficit in terms of wheat, rice basically. Wheat, we were importing 10 million tons a year at that time under PL 480. And therefore we said, okay, we are introducing new technology, the production will increase, and whenever production suddenly increases, and if demand doesn't match with that, prices at the time of harvest collapse. And that is the time when the government should come in and give a support. It is very clearly mentioned that if the market is ready to give a better price to the farmer, then the government should compete in the market and buy at that price. What is happening today? Price last year at this time, wheat price was 2,700 rupees. Government said, oh, this is very high inflation. So government started unloading wheat from its own pocket, FCI, at 2,200 rupees. So they brought the market price down to MSP, literally, so that they can procure. So MSP became the maximum support price rather than the minimum support price. So you don't allow the we worked it out, farmers lost roughly 40,000 crores in that business. First thing, you put an export ban.
That's half of Manrega budget.
Export ban, then you put stocking limits on the traders, and then you unload below your economic cost, literally dumping in your own country, because there are vocal consumers here whom the government needs to attend to. And I must put a caveat here that the policy maker has to walk on a very tight rope. So I have sympathy with him, because if the prices go up, the consumers shout. If the prices go down, farmers are on the road. So farmers want a better income. That is, all of us perhaps would agree on that. One is through the diversification route. But second, by minimizing the price risk. That is what they are asking for. But if you read more than that, they are saying not just legalizing, but increase my MSP to C2, that is comprehensive cost, which will increase the MSP by 25% in one go. If all the crops, of course, for each crop it will be different, so we worked it out. 25% increase in the prices of 23 crops in one go, what would happen? There would be surpluses, but not that much of demand of many crops. Who will buy? If you make it legal, then I will not come forward as a trader to buy that. That means everything the government will have to buy. 23 crops. But there are 100 crops. Why not for them also? Why not for milk? Milk is a commodity whose value is bigger than rice plus wheat plus sugarcane plus pulses altogether. Why not have minimum support price for milk and a legal price for that?
So the farmer's argument here is that if you can import 2,20,000 tons of edible oils and pulses, what 210 crores of edible oil and pulses,
Sure.
why don't you pay me that money? And I'll grow.
No oil seeds through. By growing oil seeds, you cannot satisfy the demand of edible oils in the country. The only plant which can give you 4 tons per hectare is palm.
Okay.
And that is what you are importing.
Yes.
Much of your import of
Yes.
edible oil, that's the cheapest in the world because of that productivity.
Yes.
And nature has blessed Indonesia and Malaysia because of the high rainfall.
Yes.
So we have about 2 million hectares which can be identified in the coastal areas and northeast where it can be grown. I think government has already started a program on that. That is one way. But oilseeds, there is some leverage. But the productivity of oil from oil seeds, soybean, 18% oil. It will be 200 kilograms per hectare that you will get out of that. 400 kilograms maximum. You need 4 tons per hectare. That's the problem. So I don't think we will be able to achieve through oil seeds, and then you will divert land from other cereals, other things. So it's not that easy. But what is the best way to reduce the price risk? In advanced countries, if at all we become advanced country by 2047, they operate through futures markets. So you look towards what the price is going to be after 4 months when you bring your produce in the market. But we suspend futures at the drop of a hat. So there is no messenger telling you what the price is likely to be. There is a contract farming that reduces the price. And government should come only as a last resort when there is an extreme crisis. But if you want to take over the markets through legalizing this route, I think you will go 20 years behind, not 20 years forward. Thank you.
Dr. Chand, your views on this?
I feel there is need for MSP. That is because of nature of demand for agriculture commodities, particularly staples. You know that we can live without eating fruit and vegetable, but we can't live without eating rice and wheat or staples. So there are reason on demand side which says that small fluctuation in production can lead to huge fluctuation in prices. Like if production increase by 5%, depending upon elasticity, the price may come down by 50%. So that kind of nature of demand is there, because of which you need MSP. Now, one situation is that if market is competitive, if it is giving you a remunerative price, then you need not give MSP. That is what was intended through 3 farm laws, but sadly they have to be bid on. So to the extent market could give a remunerative price, that option now with that bidder, now some states of course they are doing it. But even if market are competitive, in the year of bumper crop, prices crash. So you need some sort of government support. That's why even China is giving, even US is giving, even Europe is giving. So that is one situation. But the contention is that what is that MSP which should be assured whether legally or without legal thing. To my mind, I have written a piece in Indian Express giving my personal view. Please do not interpret that I was speaking government's view. These are not government's view. These are my personal views. If you have a MSP which is suggested by a expert body, which understand demand and supply situation, which take into account demand and supply situation, which also balances that even beyond that we need to provide farmer profit 8%, 10% based on situation. If you leave it to that expert body and whatever is their recommendation, I strongly support that MSP. But thing is that if you arbitrarily started saying it should be 50% more, in fact, I have no hesitation to admit that I invited Honorable late Swaminathan Sahab to NITI Aayog, a meeting with 12 persons. Please help us understand how you arrived at a figure of 50%. Why not 40%? Why not 80%? We requested him to explain to us why margin should be given on those costs which are not incurred by farmers, like rent for own land, value of family labor. That cost should be paid, but why there should be margin of 50% on those things? I am sharing with you, you can ask other 11 members who were there. He did not provide us any justification. But I am saying is that MSP, which has implication over lakhs of crores of rupee, and lakhs of crore is a big money. These days people talk on TV debate, they say, what is this, only 1 trillion? As if trillion is not a big amount, as if you are asking about few thousand. So you see, when you are giving MSP, that to keeping parity, you are giving MSP to so many crops, you have to consider it. That can't be based on that kind of wish of a particular person. So I think whenever in future this debate will happen, I think that debate will focus on what is logical MSP. If we arrive at that logical MSP, I see justification in that just paying that MSP, ensuring that farmer get that MSP.
Right. Ajay, your views on that?
So I'll quickly run through this because I think there is too much ambiguity on what does a legal MSP mean, other than the aspect of how do you calculate an MSP. I mean, the how do you calculate an MSP? Even operationalizing it, there are a lot of ambiguities, even amongst farmers. And forget activists. So, for example, should it be for 23 crops? Should it be for fruits and vegetables? Is it practical? Should it be for all the produce that a farmer makes, like in Punjab and Haryana for wheat and paddy? Or should it be for 5 acres per family, as it is for chana, moong, and sarson and other produce in Rajasthan, Haryana, and Madhya Pradesh and other things? There could even be ambiguity. I mean, there would also be a demand, a valid demand, which would say that if there was a situation like that, a legal MSP, then you couldn't allow someone in Jaisalmer to grow sugarcane, right? True. There would be a area crop production plan, and you'd have to base your idea on a area crop production plan. And I think no government, this one and any other government would, I mean, I don't think so any new government is coming in, but even if there was a new government coming in, and maybe there was the opposition which is saying we'll give a legal MSP, no government will give a legal MSP. So rather than talk about it, I'll just want to take a minute and put a question for everyone to think. Amitabh Kanji is here, I think so. You should also think about this question. Now the question is that, I mean, think about the point that 90% of farmers in India own 1 hectare or less of land, or they are agricultural labor. On the other part, the priority of all governments in the past, this government and in the future, will be controlling inflation. We've been hearing that since yesterday, we're hearing today. You're never going to allow farm gate prices to rise to their market levels, as Ashok Gulati ji is saying. In such a situation where 90%, where the land holding is so small, and the government is not going to allow you to get the best price possible, then is incomes the best way to look forward for the rural masses? I think when economists talk about incomes, farmer unions are talking about incomes for MSP, economists are talking about incomes, the government is talking about incomes. But when you look at farmers, which have 1 hectare of land, half of that is not irrigated. Government does not allow you to get best prices. Even today, you have sugar, you have limitations on sugar export, you have wheat export limitations, you have rice export limitations, you have onion export restrictions. Based on all this, I think the government priority going to 2047 should be universal basic services, because every generation wants their children and the next generation to have better living standards. If your incomes are not going to rise higher than the inflation, then how are you going to improve your living standards? I think the government should be focusing on education, health, public transport. You know, depending on how much finance you have, you should focus on the bare minimum, and that is what I think should be the idea of the government. I think the Modi government is already doing it in a way, because they've gone for housing, they've gone for sanitation, they've gone for health schemes. But that is the future of 2047 I look at for rural India.
I think we're absolutely running short of time, and I don't know whether can we take 2 questions from the audience? One? Okay, okay. So that comes down to one more. So if anyone from the audience is willing to ask a question, yeah, that gentleman there, I think he will. Please take your mic, sir.
Thank you, sir, for such an insightful session. Just put in a dampener. What do you think would be the contribution of agriculture to India GVA in 2047, and contribution to employment, which is, I think, close to 43, 45 that you have said in your own paper, and 18% of GVA. So what do you think would be these numbers in 2047? The other question is, we talk of investing in our institutions. But if you look at the institutions now, they are not very efficient. You go to a KVK, you go to these ICR centers, they are not at all efficient. And we need to invest in that before scaling it up. Third point is about dairy versus
I think
staples.
we have time for just one.
Just
and
one.
You have made 2.
It's also the role of collective, it is very important in dairy as compared to the staples, which has ensured that even at 20% growth, people are ready to pay. So the role of collective also has to be highlighted. Thank you.
So let me break it down. The ICR part, Dr. Chand, you can take, and the growth part and the dairy part. Growth you can, obviously, Mr. Gulati, you can answer, and the poultry. So we can have.
I can't answer the GVA. I think so. Both the economists
no,
should
that's what I'm
answer
saying. The GVA, Dr. Chand will be the correct person to answer. Where do you see agriculture's GVA in 2047? You are hopeful that it should increase by 4.
Okay. You see, it is very simple that you simply split 100 into 82 plus 18, and on 18 you apply a growth rate of say 3.5 or 4%. On 81 you apply growth rate of 8% and 9%. That will take you to the situation that share of agriculture in GVA will be between 8 to 10%. Employment is more difficult because it depends upon so many things. That kind of simple calculation cannot be done for employment. But looking at experience of recent experience of China and other country, the Arthur Lewis hypothesis is not working exactly the way he visualized at that time. And therefore, people who will be employed in agriculture as a principal occupation will be at least 2 times of the share of agriculture in GVA. That means around 18 to 20%.
Dr. Gulati, your views, and one more thing, that question on ICR and that I want you to answer. Where do the research institutions, role of research institutions in 2047?
Well, if we have to feed our people, and we are going to be 1.6 billion people by that time, you have to invest. And the most potent force to increase productivity is R&D, water, and of course fertilizers. But we need to learn how to use them. Fertilizers we are using in a very, very inefficient way, I would say. Water, all water guzzling. So if you look at the water productivity rather than land productivity, I think the mindset has to change. Don't measure 5 tons per hectare, measure how much grain you are getting per unit of cubic meter of water. That's the critical part of the thing. But you said collectives and dairy side. That's very critical because of the small holdings. You know, water is perfectly divisible in a way, seed is divisible, fertilizer is divisible, but when they have small lots of surpluses, they need to aggregate to cater to the processors or exporters or big retailers. And that needs to be collected. So the wonder of India was milk. And milk, we are producing 230 million tons. The second number is of US at 103 only. 103 versus 230, and in 1951, they were at 53 and we were at 17, 17. They were 3 times ahead of us, and it is all done by the institutional revolution. The technology is simple, productivity is still low, but it is the institutional reform that turned around the table, and we have shown to the world that even with the average herd size of less than 4, we can have abundance of milk. So I think we have to look at policies, we have to look at technologies, but we have also to look at the institutions for the smallholder. If you tune it this way, the same land will be producing double of what it is producing today.
And Ajay, your last word.
Yeah,
the
last
farmer's
word is that the problem is not with ICR research institutions here. I mean, obviously there's a huge problem, but the real problem of agriculture is this at the state level, because it's a state subject. You know, यहाँ बैठे we say कि KVKs are not working. You go to extension officers, जो खेत में आके farmer को सिखाता है, उसको no state government is paying him petrol money to go to the farmer's field. They say आपको तनख्वाह दे रहे हैं, आप जाओ अजय जाखड़ के खेत में जाओ, उसके खेत में जाओ, उसके खेत. How many farms can he go to if you don't even give him petrol money? Because that's the investment that needs to come in research and development. You have 60% vacancies, I said, in agriculture research institutions from the central government, union government to the state governments. So if the staff is not available, how will they deliver to farmers? And because this staff is not available, there is no transparency, there is no accountability, there's a governance problem. Farmers are forced to use spurious and inferior pesticides, seeds, and other things. Because I've seen with my experience that extension officers don't even file a case against a private spurious seeds seller, not because he's taking bribes, I'm not trying to blame him for that, but because उसने अगर केस फाइल कर दिया तो अगले 20 साल तक उसको कोर्ट में धक्के खाने पड़ेंगे अपनी गवाही देने के लिए. And the system is not geared for it. So I really think there is an inherent governance problem that is drawing agriculture back at the state levels. And that's where I think, so I'll just end my statement there. Thank you.
And with this, we come to the end of this panel discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much to our esteemed panelists for your time and your participation at Business Standard Manthan. Please do come together for a group photograph. And thank you to you for moderating this session.